I'm Brian Lewis, Chairman of the SIGA Standing Committee on Gender, Race, Inclusion, and Diversity. As we discuss and have conversations about empowering women in sport and empowering women leadership in sport in particular, we have to have the uncomfortable conversations. Why, we may ask, is it necessary to have a particular focus on advancing and promoting and reaching out to women, youth, young girls, and young female adults, to not only get them involved in sport, but to get them to maintain their involvement in sport and retain their passion and joy and love sport. Not only from the participation aspect, not only from if they have the necessary talent to reaching the highest level in sport, be it professional, be it at a world championship level, be it at the Olympic level, but to get them to stick around and remain to become sport administrators, sport leaders, and sport managers. But why? Why is all this necessary? It is necessary because sport traditionally has been male dominated, an old boys club, one where the socialization of women has been submersive and submissive to men, whether because of cultural norms, religious norms, and societal norms. Women traditionally have been given a particular role. But the reality is that the systemic sexism and discrimination needs to be stopped. We need to have zero tolerance for discrimination against women. In the current environment, it is a reality that COVID-19 is gender regressive, that domestic violence, gender-based violence, sexual violence, human trafficking of young girls and young females have become very prevalent. It is a fact, based on surveys, that the challenge of providing caregiving during COVID-19, the burden has fallen heavily on women. Therefore, it should be very obvious that in the context of post-COVID, women's involvement in sport, not just from the participation base and the competitive base, but the leadership base, is compromised. We run the risk of whatever progress that have been made over the years to create a better environment for women in sport will be a setback. There is going to be a setback. And therefore, for those who champion and advocate and want to create the environment that encourages and empowers women in sport and empowers and enables and mentors women into leadership in sport, must be vigilant. We must not take anything for granted. So there are a number of very important questions that need to be asked, and they include: what should sport organizations do to empower women in sport? How important it is for men to support the process of empowering women in sport. What are the biggest obstacles for women involved in sport, or what? Or is it that there's just one obstacle, or is it a number of obstacles? And of course, why is the work of the Standing Committee on Gender, Race, Inclusion and Diversity so important? The Standing Committee on Gender, Race, Inclusion and Diversity plays an important role because it acts as a check and balance against the absence of a process, absence of policies and procedures that create the environment that allows women and young women and young girls to become involved in sport and to stay involved in sport. It acts as a checks and balance against the abuse of power that creates an environment that is antagonistic and unempowering to women in sport. What is the biggest obstacle, or are there a number of obstacles? An important obstacle that I believe must be addressed is the fact that women can be their own worst enemies in the efforts to move forward. Why? There are many different reasons. It could be socio-cultural. It could be the fact that how we all have been socialized. It could be that the environment is so intimidating that women are afraid to step forward, and those who are afraid run the risk of being isolated even by women. Another obstacle is the pure reality of the unconscious bias and discrimination. There's also an issue that relates to the question of gender and heteronormative constructs of gender that don't acknowledge intersectionality and the various other aspects. So that when we talk about gender, for most people, it is the traditional approach of a discussion on gender. As we look forward to the years ahead, that discussion on gender is going to become a little more complex. It is not going to be based solely on a traditional conservative definition of male and female. It is very important that we understand and appreciate and be honest with each other about what we need to do, where we need to have a collaborative approach, where there needs to be consensus, where there needs to be evolution, and where there needs to be a revolution. It is very, to me, what the objective cannot be is exchange. Because even if it is well-intentioned, the efforts to empower women, you don't want to exchange an incompetent, inefficient, ineffective male leader for an incompetent, ineffective, inefficient female leader. So, in the effort to empower women in leadership, we must also focus on ensuring that women acquire the necessary skills of leadership. It's not just one element of leadership. I believe that having more women at the decision-making table and at the head table will lead to better governance, will lead to better leadership. Diversity of views is important. There are those who believe that 30% or 30% ratio is good enough. I don't subscribe to that view. I believe that 50-50 must be the target. I do accept and acknowledge that it will not be easy. We are talking about deep-rooted biases, cultures, norms, and values. But it is now. The future is now. Not later, not next week, not next month, not when COVID is over. It has to start now. And we must accelerate our efforts. We must become more assertive, more revolutionary. We cannot subscribe to tokenism and lip service. We must walk our talk. Men and women who are committed to the vision and mission of empowering women in sport must stand up and be counted. The future generations of leadership on the whole that gives women a say at the head table, that effort must start now. We can no longer be comfortable with going along with the status quo. So, I encourage you all to engage in the SIGA Web Summit on Women in Leadership. To be honest, to be frank, to be candid, and to have the necessary conversations across all aspects of the issue that is women in sport and women in sport leadership and women in sport governance. Thank you very much for the courtesy of your time, and do have an enjoyable summit.